I am not dying, I am dancing, dancing along in the madness. There is no sadness, only the song of the soul, and we'll sing this song. Why don't you sing along? And you can sing for a long, long time. Why don't you sing this song? Why don't you sing along? And we can sing for a long, long time. What do you do for your living? Are you forgiving? If you need shelter, follow your love will find you. The truth will unbind you. Seek out a song of the soul, and we'll sing this song. Why don't you sing along? And we can sing for a long, long time. Why don't you sing this song? Why don't you sing along? And we can sing for a long, long time. Come to your life like a warrior, nothing will bore ya. You can be happy. Let in the light, it will heal you, and you can feel you. Sing out a song of the soul, and we'll sing this song. Why don't you sing along? And we can sing for a long, long time. Why don't you sing this song? Why don't you sing along? And we can sing for a long, long time. Love of my life, I am crying. I am not dying, I am dancing, dancing along in the madness. There is no sadness, only the song of the soul, and we'll sing this song. Why don't you sing along? And we can sing for a long, long time. Why don't you sing this song? Why don't you sing along? And we can sing for a long, long time. Here we go. And we can sing for a long, long time.
Thank you, Jeanette. That was gorgeous, as usual, and a perfect way to set our mood. I'm Jeanne Córdova. Welcome. Thank you all for joining us today, for remembering Jeanne, and really for celebrating Jeanne. Our shero and friend was a visionary, charismatic mix of feminist revisioning and presentation, and of endless positive possibilities. Again and again, she saw unmet needs and convened a group to address those needs in new, good ways. One important example is the Lesbian Tide, of which you will hear more. Recall that when Jeanne founded the Tide, we didn't have websites, we didn't have Gay Straight Alliance student clubs and other ways to find each other. Our lives and needs were of no interest whatsoever to the mainstream media. And so the Tide made a real difference to our ability to see and come to understand ourselves and to build our community. And then there was the Gay and Lesbian Yellow Pages, which made it possible to find and support each other in tangible ways. And more recently, Lex, the Lesbian Exploratorium, the Gender Play Exhibit, Butch Voices conferences, and so much more. Jeanne was a leader by natural gift of personality and from growing up as one of the older of a family of 12 children, and both parents filled with entrepreneurial spirit. She pushed herself through to the very last days to make a difference by telling her truth in dramatic form, as in her multiple books, and most recently the Lambda Literary Award-winning When We Were Outlaws, a memoir of love and revolution. And also by giving her financial resources generously with thoughtful plans. Her clear-eyed, radically affirming vision will be nourishing positive change for lesbians and gender nonconforming people for a very long time through her gifts to the Lambda Literary Foundation, National Gay and Lesbian Journalists Association, Outright Action International, the Palapa Society of Todos Santos in Mexico, and others. And she's given especially generously to the Estrella Lesbian Foundation for Justice. Estrella's Naomi Sobel is here today, and I'm sure she'll be happy to talk with folks about the plans for the Jeanne Córdova Fund, which will be supporting national and international organizations focusing on movement building and human rights, journalism, and of course, promoting lesbian culture. This last period was hard work for Jeanne, and yet she continued to be the engaged, playful, brilliant friend whose absence is going to be felt for a very long time. A while ago, she named us siblings of choice, which was really perfect. It was one of the countless ways that she fashioned her life, relationships, and community into good, new, enduring forms. Sometimes, before you know it, a person becomes a part of you, and I'm so grateful to her for that. And likewise to Lynn Bowman for becoming family with us and welcoming us to join them on this journey. So we're here to celebrate Jeanne's extraordinary spirit with appreciation and with love. And being a gifted writer herself, Lynn fittingly has fashioned this afternoon's celebration to spotlight the distinct chapters of Jeanne's life and work. So we're going to begin with a video look at Jeanne's childhood, followed by her sister Mary and brother Fred. We're going to speak on behalf of the entire Córdova clan.
I probably should have known I was gay right from birth, practically, because I was always, you know, a little, I got footballs and erector sets and trains, you know, when I was 5, and I throw out all the dolls, so I had my mother pretty well trained by the time I got into primary school.
It's the holly that will be on your own front door. For it's Christmas once more.
Good afternoon. So, thank you for coming. We're gathered here today to talk about Jeanne Córdova. And most of us know her through all of her accomplishments, her books, her newspaper, The Lesbian Tide, The Square Peg, the Gay and Lesbian Yellow Pages, many rallies and awards. But who was Jeanne? And how did she become who we knew at the end? Well, Jeanne was my big sister. She was number 2 out of the 12, and I was number 4. When I was first asked what do I remember about Jeanne as a child and growing up, I was hard pressed to know what it was because I know her now. But as I pondered this for a while, I began to remember Jeanne as she was growing up into herself and who she became. Well, Jeanne didn't just become a butch, as she said in her video there. She always was. She went to bed with her cowboy boots on. She loved marbles and baseball and yo-yo and ping pong. And she was always fiercely competitive, as shown by she carried around this pillow sack full of the marbles that she had won from the neighborhood and became champion at the National Yo-Yo Competition, along with our next-door neighbor, Joe Bush. As kids, we played war in the streets with our red wagons and bean shooters made from telephone cables and paracantha berries. We had ping pong tournaments. And also, as you all know, Jeanne had this thing for justice. Well, this grew in the back bedroom of our house where we would hold court. Jeanne always got to be judge. And the rest of us took turns being the prosecutor, the defender, the perpetrator, or the victim. Over things like, did Leslie really steal Lulu's pencil, or did she just borrow it? But being a small-time judge was not enough for Jeanne, of course. She had greater grand ideas of grandeur. So on her 50th birthday, we crowned her King or Jeanne. And we held a big party where we ate and drank and held merry, and we walked up and down the streets of San Marino carrying banners. Growing up Catholic and having two type A parents gave Jeanne more a sense of self-discipline than a dogmatic faith. She used this self-discipline combined with her passion and competitiveness to achieve excellence in everything that she did. She wouldn't settle for less. She honed her team building skills by creating baseball teams on the block and rallying for support for her choice in TV shows, especially when our parents were gone for TV. Jeanne and brother Bill were the best of buddies. They always had a secret club going. They built forts in the dirt fields that were in the neighborhood. And this grew into their adolescent confidant age where they would share all their dreams and their woes. Jeanne mentored her 10 younger siblings at a very early age. At a recent family gathering that we had to honor Jeanne, we recalled stories that she gave Sister Zoe her first drum, and Sister Lou's daughter her first switchblade. She mentored our brother Declan as he too discovered that he was gay and struggling with his religion, and brother Vincent with his writing skills. And with me, she taught me how to stay calm and breathe easily in time of panic and overwhelm, simply by sitting on the chest of a scrawny 11-year-old. Our nieces and nephews remember Jeanne as being interested in them, as she would take one or another aside at a family gathering and spend an hour or more with them, just finding out who they were and what their dreams and aspirations were. Growing up in a large family, you learn to be tough, never say die. But you also learn to be sensitive and loyal to the family and to the community. So Jeanne had a tough outer persona, but she was tender on the inside. Kind of like a deep fried burrito, I think. When she came out in her early 20s, she was deeply hurt by the rejection of our parents who were ignorant at the time of gay and lesbian life. But this hurt actually made her more compassionate for others who were rejected and fueled her conviction to stand as a beacon for the disenfranchised. In a recent email, the conversation between Jeanne and my oldest sister, France, they talked about how our choices define our lives. And how Jeanne's choice, her greatest choice, was how she articulated her cause. Jeanne did not choose to sit quietly. She chose to be transparent and loud and clear about her life. And she served as a catalyst for others to do the same, to come out of the dark in full expression of who they are. There's an expression that the truth shall set you free. And while the truth often causes pain, I believe it did set Jeanne and the movement on a liberating path. Jeanne chose to live with courage and conviction, and to combine that with a lust for life and compassion. Her courage was demonstrated by the many firsts, the Tide, the Yellow Pages, her books, wild interviews with Angela Davis, the Black Panthers, and even a Nazi extremist. Her conviction showed up in her working tirelessly late at night in the wee hours of the morning at strategy meetings. And her joy can be seen here in this room, in Lynn, and in all her many, many dear friends and sisters of choices. Her compassion shows up in the Palapa Society that was mentioned earlier, her counseling youth, and her many endowments to the various organizations and foundations. The movement was Jeanne's life. But she was not simply an advocate for lesbian women. She was a champion for all the oppressed, no matter who they were, what their sex was, what their economic situation was. There was a special place in Jeanne's heart for anyone rejected, abandoned, abused, or just plain left out. The Palapa Society that was mentioned was a nonprofit that Lynn and Jeanne created in Mexico, in Todos Santos, a little community an hour outside of Cabo San Lucas. And that society not only helped the community improve their self-image by improving buildings and frescoes, it helped the locals in every way possible, from medicine to jobs to education, as witnessed by our sister Lou when she went to visit. The defender of the oppressed was Jeanne's spirituality. She believed that we are our sister's keeper, that we are all one, and we rise together. She taught her siblings that it is a good thing to be unique, and it's a marvelous thing to announce yourself with pride. So who is Jeanne Robert Córdova? She's a courageous warrior, a compassionate compadre, a transparent, brilliant beacon for social justice. Her energy will not die. It will not be gone. It will live in our hearts, in our minds, forever.
That was wonderful. Thank you, Mary. Sisters and brothers, extended family and friends, thank you for coming today to remember Jeanne. She would be so honored and humbled to see everyone here talking about her, remembering a life well lived, well chosen. On behalf of her sibs of birth, the outlaws, the nieces and nephews, thank you for being here. Thank you for loving Jeanne as much as we love Jeanne, as much as she loved you. We are so honored by your presence today. Today we're all family, as Mary said. We're all sisters and brothers. We are so grateful to have had number two and her wonderful wife to be in our life. You're going to have to do double duty now, Lynn, as a sister and an outlaw. We love you so much and share your sorrow and your loss. We will all miss her terribly. Jeanne may be gone from this world, but she will never be gone from our hearts. It's heartbreaking when you have to say goodbye to your sister, your mentor, your friend, your confidant, your hero, at far too young an age. It makes you reflect. It draws you to search for meaning. You cry, you laugh, you wonder why. Although she's gone physically, she leaves behind an amazing legacy. I'm sure we all have special memories of Jeanne. If you close your eyes, you can feel her spirit. You see her sly smile, hear her laughter. You can feel her listening to you, sharing your pain, your anxiety, getting angry at injustice, helping you cope with life, helping you be brave. Wow. Let's not mourn too long. Let us celebrate those memories today. As you know, she is one of 12. Those of you who do not know the names, they are Francine, Bill, Mary, Leslie, Lou, Fred, Vince, Kathleen. Stay backwards if you want. We've got a lot to do. We are a family of diversity in every way, politically, socially, physically, spiritually, intellectually. Growing up as a family, we had amazing debates at the dinner table about all kinds of things, in more than a few conflicts. Some are quite legendary, as you'll hear about today. Can you imagine trying to get 12 people so different to agree on anything, much less get along? Conflict in our family was a full contact sport. We were ring-dyed, and sometimes it involved sharp objects. Never too much blood, though. And conflict isn't necessarily bad. It's actually good. It's how you build faith and trust, and she knew this. She was not afraid of conflict, especially when motivated by love. Jeanne was 8 when I was born. I barely knew her when she was growing up. None of the kids suspected that our older sister, the cool athlete, tomboy, who was a marbles and yo-yo expert, loved baseball cards, sports, and sword fighting, was lesbian. We had no idea. We were so I just remember as my athletic older sister, who almost always got away, not because she was spoiled, but because she was sort of a clever scoundrel and really knew how to figure stuff out and get what she wanted. Like dressing me up in this outfit when I was about 6 years old. She was better at it than I did, but she bribed me with candy and Cokes to be the mascot at her basketball team, and it worked. Jeanne was one of those rare souls who came of age and awareness at a time when she was needed. She did not choose to be a butch-dyke lesbian. She did not choose to be the daughter of staunch Catholic parents who wanted her to become a nun. But Jeanne was chosen. The chosen find purpose by choosing to be what they're meant to be. Edwin Martin said, choices are the hinges of destiny. Jeanne's destiny, her choice, was to be authentic and courageous at a time when it was really tough and dangerous to do so. Her courage was her faith. Courage to be yourself and show others how important that is in life. It's empowering and liberating. Some, especially my parents at the time, would say that what happened at the convent and Jeanne's response was sacrilegious. I would say she was chosen by God for a different and a very special path, to help women and men from all walks of life see past gender, past privilege, past clothes, although she was pretty much a clothes horse, to the heart and soul of a person. Kicking the habit was just the beginning. Through her actions, her discourse, her writings, she inspired so many young women to also be brave and authentic. Her early years as an athlete, playing King Arthur with brother Bill as Lancelot and trading baseball cards with older sister France, made her tough, resilient, and wise. I wept when I read We Were Outlaws. It brought so much together, connected so many dots. Jeanne was estranged from her parents for a while. I felt that pain. I was also estranged for years. She never gave up. She taught me not to give up. Cordis never give up. We don't know how. Instead, she became galvanized to challenge her lesbian sisters in the fight for social justice against what at that time looked like impossible odds. She fought for awareness, understanding, respect, and most of all, love. Over the years, she helped us so profoundly change the world in which we live, the way people think, feel, and behave. In time, she won over Mom, a closet feminist, who helped win over Dad. She taught Mom and Dad and her sisters and brothers, my daughters, to love the soul of a person, and that every person, no matter who they choose to love, deserves to be respected and loved. She became a counselor in a very special way to her LGBT declan. She was confidant to several sisters and brothers, and a very special and dear soul to me and my daughters. She was my rock and my hero. In the last years, we became particularly close. We talked often, but not enough. We talked about changing the world. She was so much better at it. Jeanne was our King Arthur, the idealist. She made you want to be a better knight. To have the courage to be authentic, the strength to be resilient, the temperament to lead, and most of all, the passion to pursue a cause greater than oneself. I like to think of life as a tapestry. Every day we weave our tapestry, we make choices of threads, colors, shape, and design, creating our own life story in pictures and colors. Everyone's tapestry has a few golden threads that weave through it, that give a special light and brilliance. I believe God chose Jeanne to be that golden thread for so many tapestries, reminding us to live life with purpose and meaning and love for our fellow sisters and brothers. I am so grateful that my daughters got to know her and learn about her life, her struggles, her choices, her achievements. Jeanne's memory will live in them and all of us, reminding us that we can be anything and do anything we want, especially if we engage others to help. Together we can change the world. Jeanne loved her choices and her purpose, fighting for her sisters, fighting for all of us for social justice. She would wish for us to have the courage to live authentically with passion and purpose, to never give up trying to make the world a better place, to never say no to someone in need, and never let go of those you love. Jeanne, we will never let go. Rest in peace. You are
Now we're going to turn to Jeanne, a lesbian feminist activist. This chapter, we'll see Jeanne first talking about the lesbian tide and her early organizing work, and that will be followed by Nancy Coder, a fellow lesbian feminist activist, writer, and part of Jeanne's family of choice.
Probably the biggest thing DOB did was showed me that there was a life beyond the softball field in UCLA that I could participate in. I loved politics. That's what happened. It wasn't only that I was gay. I just absolutely fell in love with politics. I'm still an activist. 20 years later, I thought it was thrilling and wonderful to organize, because I was a social worker at that time. I was getting my MSW. And I love social work and Saul Alinsky and Cesar Chavez, you know, and I was very into all that 60s stuff like that, but I hadn't found any personal expression. But I've been working in Watts, and I wanted to further that. So DOB let me take my own people and put all that social work and organizing stuff into it. That was another huge effect. Right from the beginning, I decided to be a professional lesbian, that I wanted to work in our community. And it never occurred to me to continue being a social worker or a teacher or something and just be a lesbian at night in my personal life. I've never had that feeling. And sometimes I think I have some friends, most of my friends tend to be activists, but I have some friends who seem to think being a lesbian is something you do when you get home from work at 6 o'clock. And I find that real strange, that split kind of life. I never have had it. And other people find my life strange because I've never had to divide the two. So coming out has been, you know, sometimes like 1980 I was at the Democratic National Convention and in the Montana delegation going through it with a big poster saying lesbian for Kennedy. And I got all but stoned with leaflets. So I've certainly been in places where, you know, they said, get out of here, Dyke, and lots of oppression. But the core of my life has always been very much in the lesbian ghetto, I guess. So it's all integrated. Well, when we got on the staff of the newsletter, I remember sitting around Karen's coffee table and having this discussion, this very important discussion. What shall we call this thing? And someone said, well, it's called the LADOB newsletter. Why are we having this discussion? Why don't we just keep going at that? I said, no, that's too long, nobody likes it, it's boring. Like I said, I had done a lot of writing, so I wanted my only thought was that I wanted a kind of a sexier, a more fun title. So I remember discussing Lesbos, the Isle of Lesbos, the Tide of Lesbos, you know, one of those brainstorming discussions where you say everything ridiculous. And other names like that. I remember we almost called the thing the Isle of Lesbos, and gratefully we didn't. I don't know how Tide got in there, but it did. And that morning on Karen's coffee table, the Lesbian Tide came out, and we put that name on the DOB newsletter. Right above where it said LADOB newsletter was now Lesbian Tide. The membership seemed to think that was okay. And then we changed it from being a little sheets to being a little booklet, a little 5x7 book, and we put a little cover on it. I will show you the cover there, just a riot. In fact, one of the first covers had two pictures of this little butch and femme, and then these two little lesbian feminists. And it was depicting the cultures meeting, you know, clashing up against each other. I think this was really the transition of the old gay style and lesbian feminism coming in. The 7th issue of Lesbian Tide, there's a little paragraph that says, we are now an independent lesbian magazine. We no longer belong to DOB or anybody else. And maybe in writing that sentence, I remember thinking, maybe for the first time consciously, that what we had here could be something very big. The word independent in a lesbian magazine, and it had become clear that we wanted to write about the broad spectrum. I'm always very interested in diversity and sociocultural things, because I wanted to write about everybody. And I wanted anybody to pick it up, you know, and you could argue out your viewpoint in print, you know. As a journalist, I was more committed to putting the two viewpoints into print than in taking up either side, although I did, you know, have my opinion. So, I think it was right about then that the staff began to really think we have a potential here to create something very big and very large. And I don't know if you know the time, but it did go on to be probably the one of the 2 or 3 predominant lesbian magazines across the country. But it wasn't until that 7th issue that we even really realized that potential. And it did swing dramatically into feminism and became totally identified that way.
My recollection is today was focused on the human The first time I saw Jeanne, she was leaning against a brick wall, languidly smoking a cigarette. It was 1973, and women from around the country had gathered at UCLA for the first National Lesbian Conference. My first impression was that she was breathtakingly handsome. But once we started talking, I was even more drawn to her intelligence and her intensity. Jeanne brought a natural aptitude for leadership and a surprising political acumen to the lesbian tide. I say surprising because in 1973, we were just 6 weeks apart. We were both 24 years of age. We worked together as editors and became good friends.
Feminist principles dictated that we work collectively, as hierarchy was a structure of oppression. For those of you who have never experienced the joys of collective process, I see there was some old times in the audience. Let me say that no decision was too small for every woman to not have her say. Repeatedly. Herding cats, child play, compared to getting a women's collective in the 70s to agree on anything, let alone reach the ideal of consensus. None of this seemed to affect Jeanne. She was masterful in navigating collective process. Articulate, persuasive, and most of all, indefatigable. She would cajole until she changed our minds or simply exhausted us. She was an incredibly strong woman, not known for her tact, and she was often at the center of controversy. We baby dykes were passionate about two things: our love for women and the central place of lesbian feminist theory in our movement. Conflict in our relationships and our politics often rocked our friendships and our collectives. Jeanne and my biggest political fight occurred when Jeanne wanted to remove the word lesbian from the lesbian tide. Always pragmatic, she thought it would sell more copies. I objected on principle. She won that vote. She won most of the votes with the collective. But when the circulation didn't increase, Jeanne was unafraid to admit she made a mistake, once again proudly spearheading lesbians back into the tide. Although our friendship weathered considerable political strife, when a line was crossed in the personal realm, Jeanne and I handled it with emotional intelligence and maturity that was typical of that era. We didn't talk for years. Not the only one who had it. That hiatus in our friendship was a great loss for both of us. And the irony was that when we accidentally ran into one another at a party, we couldn't stop talking and kept talking until the day she died. To say Jeanne was intelligent is wholly inadequate. Her mind was iconoclastic in vision, and that propelled her to be the leader she was. Of course, the downside of arguable genius is often a certainty that one's view of the world is correct. Never mind what we believed about self-definition, Jeanne was sure she knew me better than myself. Who was I kidding when I labeled myself that wishy-washy construct androgynous? Like her, I was butch, end of discussion. Oddly, I was more amused than irritated by her proclamations. I knew that unwavering confidence in her perceptions was part of what made her an extraordinary activist. So to take on the patriarchy in the face of absolute negation and invisibility in the late 60s and early 70s not only required courage and vision, but also a ferocious belief in oneself. Lesbians often talk about two families, family of origin and family of choice. This is particularly true of our generation, who came out before there was social recognition, let alone acceptance. There are different kinds of trenches, and the bonds forged between us are similar to the way soldiers describe wartime. Our lives, if not literally, depended on having each other's back. Jeanne and I shared that bond. We argued and teased and loved each other like siblings. Given my lens, I saw her as the sister I never had, and given her lens, she saw me as the brother she wished she had. But what's the little discrepancy in gender labeling between old friends and comrades? People are always reinventing themselves, but with Jeanne, one thing never changed: her dedication to the movement. She worked tirelessly to make the world a better place for lesbians and gay men, then queers of color, then butchers and trans people. She was unmistakably a woman of action, and in my lexicon, she was a lesbian feminist action hero. The highest tribute I can pay her, and the one that I think Jeanne herself would most value, is that she was truly a revolutionary till the day she died.
So as you know, Jeanne lived a very public life. But there were many sides of Jeanne, likes and dislikes, and some were not nearly so well known. In honor of that delightful complexity of Jeanne, here is your first installment of 10 things you may not have known about Jeanne. Number 1. I think you heard that she liked playing the yo-yo, but Jeanne was no ordinary yo-yo player, no. Jeanne was the regional yo-yo champion in 1964. And she was scary skilled at playing marbles, and usually ended up with most of the marbles at the end of the games.
In grade school, as you heard, Jeanne wanted to be King Arthur and sometimes Lancelot, never Guinevere. And she and her siblings and the neighborhood kids played Camelot as a game. Finally, for her 50th birthday, the family crowned her King Arjeanne, and she embraced with delight.
So Jeanne's older sister won the Junior Miss contest in high school. So their mother expected Jeanne to compete the next year. So years later, all Jeanne could remember of that experience was her yellow formal gown and big hair. She claimed that the rest of her memories of that day had been wiped out by PTSD.
So in the convent, Jeanne learned to play a few songs on the guitar. This proved to be quite useful later for impressing the girls.
So no matter how avant-garde Jeanne's ideas were, she really stayed a 50s kid at heart. She loved corny Christmas songs like Perry Como and Johnny Mathis, 50s diners and food. She would be very sad to know that the Johnny Rockets on Melrose just closed. And she knew she knew all the words of the Purple People Eater. Now who could claim that?
So now we're going to hear from somebody who actually might have been dancing to the Purple People Eater song when it hit #1 on the Billboard chart in 1958. I confess I didn't hear it then. But our next speaker has been an adored local hero for decades and truly a pivotal figure in the national movement, the lesbian feminist movement. I want to introduce Jeanne's best butch bud, Ivy Bottini. This hand. Thank you. Oh, you were here. Oh, preparation.
Yeah, right.
I remember when I could take 3 steps at a time. Now we're looking at the new one. Jeanne is my best friend. I cannot use the past tense anymore. I just can't do it. Jeanne is my best friend. I remember the first time I saw Jeanne. It was at the 73 National Lesbian Conference. It was brief. I saw all these lesbians walking into UCLA, and I was on guard duty for Robin Morgan.
and because they thought she would be shot. It was very exciting. And I was the one person they had to get through. That was the first time I saw Jeanne. The next time I saw Jeanne was about 2 or 3 years later, and it was in the women's saloon. Do you remember the women's saloon? On Fountain Avenue near Normandy. And I was there with my then partner, Diane, and we were sitting in the outside patio area, and there was music on, and I was facing this little dance area, and I looked, and I saw this amazingly stunning bush. A fashion trend was created that evening, and it consisted of a white shirt, no bra, unbuttoned to the navel. That's when I met Jeanne Córdova. I fell in love with her that night. Not the sexual stuff, no, but I fell in love with her being that exuded from her. And that has never changed for me. I'm still in love with Jeanne Córdova. She was, we know a lot about all the wonderful things she's done. But there are those little endearing things that only friends know about. And Jeanne hated vegetables. Her whole life. And since she was the oldest girl, the second born, she would pass her plate under the table to the younger ones, and they'd eat her vegetables. Lynn, her amazing, amazing wife, she actually got Jeanne to eat some broccoli. I knew they were meant to be together. Early on, Jeanne loved York peppermint patties. This is interesting, isn't it interesting? But this is what made Jeanne so human for me. Later on, she was absolutely insane over the carrot cake at the French market. Jeanne would have wonderful gatherings at wherever she and Lynn lived. And this happened to be that I noticed it in the Los Feliz home, and there were 3 years maybe. But there was kind of an inner circle that Jeanne had, and Jeanne has, I just changed the pronoun. Huh. Oh well. Jeanne has an inner circle. And I noticed as we were waiting for her to not make an entrance, but to come out of her bedroom after picking the perfect shirt, the perfect hat, the perfect jacket, the perfect vest, When she entered the room, maybe it was just me, but I swear the energy changed. I could feel it, it just changed. And people turned, and there she was. She was magnetic. She was Jeanne. She was my best friend, and still is and will always be. You're my buddy, my pal, my friend. It'll be that way till my end. And wherever you go, I want you to know. You're my buddy, my pal, my friend. There you go.
Thank you, Ivy. You are amazing. As folks can probably tell, this is a woman of extraordinary talents, an amazing activist and visual artist, but also a woman who's been a performer in many stages, and I'm very grateful that she's here with us today. And so now we're going to have a chance to appreciate how Jeanne has been a friend, a loving support, a cheerleader, a playmate, and an inspiration to a large, that is very large, extended next generation of Córdovas. We're going to see a slideshow put together by some of the nieces and nephews, and then we'll hear from Jeanne's niece, Jeanne Córdova.
Hi, I'm Jeanne Córdova. I'm the oldest daughter of Jeanne's second brother, the seventh sibling of the House of Córdova. Jeanne was my aunt, but she was so much more than just an aunt to me. You've already heard about Jeanne from my dad and from Mary as a sister, and from Nancy and Ivy as an activist, butch warrior best friend. But I wanted to share with you my memories of Jeanne as a nurturer and as a mentor. I can't think of exactly when Jeanne and I became as close as we were, but I can tell you about my early memories of her. If you know Jeanne or have read her books, you know her parents' home was not an easy one to grow up in. This was especially true for the 12 sibs, as they call themselves. But as the 12 grew up, their numbers swelled as they married, had children, and eventually had grandchildren of their own. So the one constant was that every member of this growing, multiplying tribe was constantly competing for the highly divided attention of the family's leaders. So needless to say, the family politics, especially at the holidays, got very complicated, and more than anything, extremely loud. What you may not know about my grandparents' home was that, especially for a child, it was objectively kind of terrifying. It was enormous, with dark wood, and unusually thick carpet that exactly matched the ample velvet drapes, which were roughly the color of fresh blood. Probably now that I've heard everyone else's speeches because of all the competition. The walls were hung with black wrought iron sconces, and there were a few merely life-size marble nudes, and at least one bronze sculpture of a very distressing scene between some mer people on the coffee table. The whole look came together very San Marino suburban Mask of Zorro, right down to the taxidermy fox that legend has it, we called him Punka, our grandpa, hit with his car somewhere near the ranch. I don't know. Our family mostly gathered on Christmas, and when the chaos of 20 plus cousins, plus their mothers and fathers, aunts and uncles, when it all got to become too much, especially when the one year we all got medley harps as our Christmas gifts, which you can imagine, I would just gravitate to Jeanne and to Lynn, who was always by Jeanne's side, and they would be my still point in the swirling circus. The two would be on the back porch steps talking because, well, they would be on the back porch steps talking, being the still point for one another. It was cold because it was Christmas, and they would be huddled together, freezing in the orange glow of that back porch light, and they would be analyzing this year's gathering and the political maneuverings, and they would be having what I can now appreciate was a blessedly needed cigarette. My dad would sometimes poke his head out and he would shout, "If you give her a cigarette, I'll make you eat it." And then he'd be lost again in the chaos of the crowd. And of course, this forbiddenness made me not just see Jeanne and Lynn as my aunts, but now they were my cool aunts. In those moments, I first came to think of Jeanne and Lynn as the builders and custodians of psychic and emotional safety. When the pandemonium of all these 40 to 50 plus tension-starved family members vying at full throttle for their parents' or grandparents' affection and attention, Jeanne offered me exactly those things. As a child, I thought this was kind of funny. Why is it that my aunt, who is masculine and gruff, and who most of the adults seem to be mildly afraid of, why is that where I feel the most safe? What I realized is that Jeanne offered anyone who sought it the things that were so scarce in our family by dedicating her life to fighting for what was just and building safe, respectful, nurturing places for herself and her self-identified sisters everywhere. I think Jeanne saw in me a familiar sense of pain and sense of exclusion. When my parents divorced and my sisters and I began to take the awkward, faltering steps at re-entering the extended family, it was Jeanne and Lynn who helped me feel like I had a place in the home of my grandparents. Whether you think of it as one of God's jokes, one of life's ironies, or a lesson that would make the world a better place, the truth is it wasn't Jeanne's tough butch exterior or the devilish pleasure that she got from lobbing the equivalent of conversational cherry bombs into a room. No, her radicalism came from a place of fierce, loving inclusion. Jeanne fought to make space for everyone who wanted to be included. I'm reminded of the most beautiful compliment from one of Jeanne's closest friends. When her friends gathered this New Year's to toast Jeanne with shots of Diet Coke, Robin Podolsky said, "Jeanne is the kind of person who blazes the trail and then reaches back to help you follow her along the way." Jeanne reached back to me a lot. She brokered the peace between my grandmother and I after about 20 years of estrangement. She invited me to help with the gender play exhibit that she and Lynn produced at Lex. And she invited me to her and Lynn's white camel holiday party. This would be the first time I would have the privilege to be invited into the family of choice. In the last few years, Jeanne was a bridge of understanding to a family dynamic I have long struggled with. In a family with a lot of distracted silence, she would tell me the stories about Grandma and Ponca, my father and his siblings. She made time for us to be together. We compared notes about life in Mexico, relationships, her journey to acceptance with her parents, and to her learning to understand love through her relationship with Lynn. I began sharing with her my writing projects, and she would share with me her critiques in her own texts. But as the cancer advanced, we would talk until she just fell asleep in her chair. She asked me to write a book about the family, so we recorded a series of interviews. She told me memories of her parents and her grandparents, the home in West Covina, and her time in Mexico. We talked about living with depression and anxiety, and her impending death, and how it felt to live with the shadow of life's biggest question mark there in the house creeping ever closer. The last time I saw her, when we said our last goodbye, she asked me why I thought we were so close. And I told her maybe it's a soul thing. And she looked at me and said, no, it's definitely not that. But I'm not sure that it matters why we were close. What matters is that I loved her, and she loved me, and that we found a mutual closeness and understanding that finally did come from a bloodline we had both struggled with for as long as we can remember. Before she fell asleep that night, she told me to be brave, and I told her I hope she haunts me because I tend to spend a lot of time talking to her ghost. Her ghost will be the mark that she left on me and each of us through her love and her courageous example in life and in dying, where I hope even a tiny piece of her bravery, her lion heart, will live in echo one.
Ma'am, please write that book. It's going to be amazing. Thank you.
Okay. Yes. Now, here's the second installment of the 10 things you may not have known about Jeanne. So folks know Jeanne, the political activist, organizer, and entrepreneur. But now, how about Jeanne the athlete? You heard a little bit about that. Yes, she loved playing softball, since when she was a youngster through high school, and even into adulthood. As a second base for the local lesbian bar teams, what a surprise, like Tully's. And the Lesbian Tide had a team, too. Naturally, it was called the Tide Amazons. And as you can see, this is the Jeanne Córdova paper doll that Frank made in the 70s. And there's even more outfits, I hear.
So as happens so often with Jeanne, even her career as a social worker tended toward the dramatic. When she was interning at the Ventura Youth Juvenile Correctional Facility, she inadvertently started a small riot. See, she thought it would be a good idea to have the girls do a play together, but somehow, apparently, the chairs ended up being thrown all around the cafeteria.
So alongside the phenomenally successful gay and lesbian community Yellow Pages, Jeanne started a New Age telephone book in 1987. But she stopped publishing that after a few years because, as she realized, no one looks for the guru in the Yellow Pages.
Now, speaking of Jeanne owning things, she really didn't like traveling unless she could drive herself wherever she was going. So in 1991, when she and Lynn wanted to explore Europe, they drove from London to Rome and back again in a car they borrowed from Lynn's brother, David, who's here with us today from London. And I don't know, David, I'm not sure where you're sitting, but I bet you remember telling them that it was a darn good thing that you had not seen the movie Thelma and Louise, right?
For about 10 years in the 90s, Jeanne had a weekend cabin in the high desert near Joshua Tree. She felt most her spiritual self when she was there. And that was when she got to wear her cowboy hat all the time and drive her truck and listen to Patsy Cline at full blast as she listened on her tape deck.
So speaking of singing, this is a slightly forced transition. Next we're going to hear from someone who is a singer. And who's been a friend to Jeanne across decades of activism, community building, and leadership here in Los Angeles. Someone whose contributions to our women's community and the broader LGBT community are legendary and who continues to envision solutions to what sometimes seem like intractable problems on behalf of those who are most vulnerable in our communities and for all of us in her role representing nearly 2 million of us on the Los Angeles County Board of Supervisors. I'd like to welcome a dear friend and the truly amazing Sheila Jeanne Co.
I'm sticking with Ivy.
All-purpose taken, yeah.
So, if I were you, I'd be saying, well, why is she up there? I was a better friend to Jeanne than she was. And, you know, I think it's because I've been a representative for 25 years that Jenny and Dorena thought, well, perhaps she could be a representative for everybody in the audience. Because each of you knew Jeanne in a different way, each of you was a friend in a different way, and she was a different person in a way to each of us. I'm struck at these memorial services, and unfortunately I've been going to more and more as the decades pass, at how each of us is kind of a kaleidoscope. Or, you know, one of those little things that you turn as a kid and all the little colors fall into patterns in different ways. That's sort of the way I think a life is. Singer-songwriter Maya Sharp wrote a song called The Dash Between the Dates. Because when you look at anyone's tombstone, you see a date, and a date, and a dash. And what we're talking about today is the dash. How to sum up all of that. It's really been wonderful listening to people talking about Jeanne in a slice of many years. And I want to give my little piece of the kaleidoscope in a different axis, which is April 13th to April 15th, 1973. I heard some of you recognizing those dates. A number of people have talked about the Lesbian conference at UCLA in 1973. Which Jeanne spearheaded, certainly never did it alone and would never have claimed to do it alone. What many of you don't know is that you cannot have a program at UCLA unless someone who's on the staff of the Campus Programs and Activities Office becomes your dean because some campus group is sponsoring you and then helps you to bring the convention or conference to campus. Associate Dean Sheila Jewell, in 1973, Jeanne who had not come out, met Jeanne Córdova. Talk about falling in love. It was like, what an incredibly handsome, gorgeous, beautiful, stunning person. But there was more to it than that. You know how they say somebody's a force of nature? But I guess given what we were going through at the time, she was a force of unnature, because of course that's the way they thought of us. But she had actually done conference 2 years before, West Coast Lesbian Conference, and figuring that maybe a few hundred more lesbians would come to this kind of international conference, we sat down to plan and to think of what it might need for a convention of lesbians. So we had an auditorium of, that would seat 700 people. We started getting mail to the Women's Resource Center, addressed to Women's Resource Center, UCLA, attention, dykes. More than one. Carrie Cobell, who was the president of the Lesbian Sisterhood, bless her heart, was the person who was the kind of sponsoring organizer on campus. But Jeanne was really the thought behind how this would be organized. Now, I don't know whether organized is how it turned out to be described, because in those days, and I know many of you in the audience whom I am representing remember very well, organized was more like, what will we argue about in this particular 15 minutes? And it's so incredibly important. So Jeanne said, well, we have to have 5 different threads that would be addressed at the Lesbian Conference. Radical feminism, cultural feminism, socialist feminism, liberal feminism, and dyke separatism. What a variety, what a spread of concepts. Everybody was so excited. But it was an important thing. I'm not making fun of it because there had been lesbian gatherings before. This was a political lesbian gathering. This was where we were going to discuss what we were about and who we were. And boy, did we. There would be a discussion about what is a lesbian? What is a woman? How many of you remember Beth Elliott? Oh my God. Beth Elliott was a transitioning transgender woman who was scheduled to entertain the first night, Friday night the 13th. That was ever planned. Ron and Morgan made a, if I may say just my opinion, horrible speech about how Beth should not be allowed to perform for obvious reasons. I mean, this conversation actually still goes on about who's a real woman. As I recall, and Robin, you can correct me, I think you and Patty actually refused to entertain because they wouldn't let Beth do it. But this may be something I remember not very well. So the other thing is, apparently Jeanne put some Trotskyite literature into the packet, and that caused a conversation for about 13 hours. As to whether that should be allowed or not. The most important thing was, here we were in this auditorium for 700 people, and guess how many showed up? 1,500. Okay, I was the associate dean that was supposed to make this all work at the conference, and Jeanne was the leader. She was everywhere. She was making decisions like crazy. She was fending off criticism. She was bringing people together. She was working so hard. Women came from 26 states, from 200 United States cities, from France, from Sweden, from Canada, from Denmark. The whole thing was kind of a victim of its own success. And there in the middle of all of it was Jeanne Córdova. Not just a natural leader, an inspirational leader. Jeanne Córdova was the archer and the arrow. She was the, if I may say, the ball in the snowball effect. It just would start out with her and someone and an idea. And pretty soon it would be our idea. And we would embrace it, and it would grow and grow and grow. She was the trumpet player who became a parade, who became a movement. This is true leadership. This is true inspiration. It was really different and special. And in my opinion, in many ways, better than many of us. There was a pure driving energy in her, and it was fueled by love. And I will never forget her. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheila. That was spot on and beautiful tribute to Jeanne. So, folks, the title of Jeanne's memoir, as you all know, When We Were Outlaws, expresses something core about Jeanne's sense of herself, a self she embraced and nourished as an outlaw, visioning radically different ways to fashion, and I picked that word intentionally, to fashion oneself, one's family, and our larger society. And then, when she met Lynn Bound, she was inspired to re-envision her life's path as a partnership, one fueled by love and guided by mutual respect and mutual delight. So please enjoy these beautiful clips of Jeanne and Lynn exchanging their vows not once, but twice, And then you'll hear from Jeanne's extraordinary life partner and soulmate, Linda Allen. So recite after me and then continue. I, Lynn, take you, Jeanne, to be my lawful spouse.
I, Lynn, take you, Jeanne, to be my lawful spouse. And reading again what I read in 1995, I promised
to cherish you and nurture you. I promise to keep your trust and to keep our family warm and safe.
I promise to keep being your best friend, playmate, and creative workmate. I promise to support and listen to you, and to believe in your work and creative genius. I promise to support you in your growth towards living in your highest self and to see your soul's true face.
And I promise to keep loving you with the sweet simplicity of love in the everyday and the intensity of love that's for always.
I, Jeanne, take you, Lynn, to be my lawful spouse.
I, Jeanne, take you, Lynn, to be my lawful spouse, until death do us part.
Okay.
And that's the first time I've said that vow. From 24 years ago, I promised to take care of you in the world, to be your best friend and solace,
To make your business in life my business, to aid, comfort, and abet. To stand by you, in front of you, or behind you, as you journey toward your highest self. To be there for you with laughter and love and money and courage. And courage to make you happy in this lifetime and to honor what is holy between us. Sincerely yours.
So, here's the legal part. With the power vested in me by the state of California, as confirmed by Judge Walker of the U.S. District Court for the Northern District of California in San Francisco, and Governor Jerry Brown, and our mixed-race, brilliant feminist Attorney General Kamala Harris, I now pronounce you legally married.
Jeanne would have been so happy to see you all, and she loved a crowd, right? Yeah. She loved bringing groups of people together, and you're exactly the right people. So Jeanne and I were together for over 26 years. It was a chunk of time, as we used to say to each other. And at that partnering ceremony in '95 that you just saw in the video, one of the poems that our friends read was called Each and Both. And it was a poem about how we were always our individual selves, and yet we were a couple at the same time. And that was the give and take of our years together. And that poem ended with the line, each and both,
you make each other more. And that more, bringing out the best in each other, was what we were to each other together. In our early years, I used to call Jeanne my knight in tarnished armor. And I had to do a little bit of polishing. And as for me, she made me brave. We made each other more. I love the very particular stories that others have told and will still tell today, but for me, it feels almost impossible to step back and have distance and pick just one story. When we were in each other's dailiness for so very long, when her brown skin, her smile, her voice were all as familiar to me as my own. But I should tell you the story of how Jeanne proposed to me. It was on December 16th, it was the second anniversary of our first sort of date. And our first date was actually a reading for Jeanne's book, Kicking the Habit. It was at the Lesbian writer series at the late great Different Life bookstore. So on our anniversary, she managed to make an excuse to go by the bookstore on the way to dinner. And she took me around the corner, and all of a sudden, in the lesbian nonfiction section, she dropped down on one knee and she said, "Will you be betrothed to be my partner?" "Yes," I said, and then the words just popped out of my mouth, "but not until we've been together 5 years. When we'll really be partners." And that was Jeanne leaping in, and that was me thinking it through. And that was us, each and both. So we really were partners in so many ways, in so many adventures that we shared. I moved to Barcelona, Mexico, our many creative adventures together, the magazines, not just the ones you've heard about, but also the little ones. Square Peg, our little magazine in Todos Santos, the lesbian history exhibits, the conferences, and our writing. There's a question in the LGBT community that we ask each other when we meet a long-term couple, and it's how long have you been together? It was a way of marking and valuing our relationships before everything got legal. And younger people hearing that Jeanne and I had been together for such a chunk of time would want to know what made for a good long-term relationship. They'd ask, "What's your secret?" And our answer, oh sure, we could have said, like good lesbians, well, we went to therapy when they had a crisis. But what we used to say was 3 words. First, we would say we were compatible, and Jeanne would actually say, we were disgustingly compatible. In that way where you just simply like hanging out with each other and you're never bored with the conversation. And second, we were complementary. Jeanne did the broad strokes, I did the details. She started, I finished. I am yin, and she was yang. And you know what, there was a third thing, and I just couldn't remember it when I was writing this. And before, I would have just stuck my head into the doorway of the study and I would have asked, "Lovey, what was that third thing?" But she isn't to ask anymore. So it's like the other half of my brain is well missing. Anyway, in '95, at that partnering ceremony, I vowed to have her find her soul's true face, and that was a big and deep journey. But we also vowed, among many other things, to love each other with the sweet simplicity of love in the everyday. And in the days right after Jeanne passed away, there were these words running through my head, and words from my own version of the poem by Auden, and they go like this for me. Words I wanted to add to the picture of my brilliant, beautifully complicated, tough, soft, true to herself Butch, my beloved sweetheart. She was my north, my south, my east, and my west. She was my working week and my Sunday rest. She was my noon, my midnight, my talk, and my song. And I had hoped that our lives together could last forever. But I was wrong. And I miss her very, very much. Thank you.
And we're all filling up and spilling over. It's like an endless waterfall, filling up and spilling over, overall. We're filling up and spilling over like an endless waterfall, filling up and spilling over, overall. Sweet woman, rising inside my glow, I know I'm loving you.
So have a deep breath. So we all can see that Jeanne has inspired an extraordinary family choice. And next, I'd like to welcome Raquel Gutierrez, Jeanne's butch son Provida for life, who embodied the young Córdova in the stage production of Jeanne's memoir. First, we're going to see a clip of Jeanne reading in West Hollywood, and then Raquel will read from Jeanne's essay in the anthology, The Persistent Desire of M. Bush Reader.
I came of age during the last years of the anti-war movement, the violence of the assassinations of the Kennedy brothers, Martin Luther, and Malcolm X. And just as I left the convent at the age of 20, I came out and became a radical lesbian activist, just at the dawn of the early struggles of the gay movement. And so on one level, I sort of walked out of the Garden of Eden and into the Dante's Inferno. So at that time, I was an investigative reporter for the Los Angeles Free Press, which was an underground radical paper. And I got involved with the Weather Underground there, and Angela Davis, and Emily Harris of the Symbionese Liberation Army. And that was the SLA that kidnapped Patty Hearst. So at the same time in the book, I'm creating my own magazine in the early days called The Lesbian Tide, which will soon become the voice of the national lesbian feminist community. So I was busy back then. I want to do a reading from the author's note to explain more what the book is about, as well as the style of writing. I was not born knowing how to love. It came to me late in life and continues to be difficult. Politics, on the other hand, came naturally, my mind attuned from birth to the ways of power and survival. I came to realize in writing this book that a writer has to have a deep understanding of love and hate and other primal contradictions in order to have something to say. When we writers sit down, we attempt to sort the good guys from the bad guys and to find what cracks in the foundation of our own character may be moral or immoral. If we write authentically, we find both inside of ourselves. My spiritual teacher, Michael Ventura, told me that writers are not nice people. Luckily, his words didn't depress me because I knew at an early age that I was too butch, too different, and too dangerous to be nice. To be nice is to bore because by definition, nice has no shadow or shade. My memoir visits many outlaws, not nice people. I am one such outlaw. I too have been willing to go too far at times. This story takes place at the intersection of the shadow and the shade that differentiates between persona and principle. I have always been fascinated by how a noisy swelling called a social movement arrives on the doorstep of an individual's life and how she or he responds to it. Most of us ignore the calling of these unfathomable energies of our times. For the rest of us, how does one recognize a social movement when it comes calling at your door? And what greatness or despair might follow should you open the door and invite someone into your life? The first step must be to recognize that a stranger of importance has shown up. And I think this kind of recognition must come from listening to the pain in your own body or mind or psyche. One asks oneself, where does it hurt? The pain in my life began at the age of 4 with the simple act of receiving the wrong Christmas present, a doll. The dissonance in your life might be more obvious. The day you were raped, the night you went to bed hungry, the day your father left home. My pain was subtle and psychic, and I could have ignored it, except that I continued to receive the wrong Christmas present for the next 18 years. That was one step in recognizing my social movement when it came knocking. The persistent noise in my head that tells me that the world's reality and your own don't match up. Thank you.
Jeanne was my big papa. She had come to know my performance and organizing work over the last decade, when she and Lynn would come support Visualize the Panochitlan theater project performance group, where we did original work illustrating different brown butch histories lodged in the lore of Los Angeles. At our events, Jeanne would marvel at my ability to convene so many young dykes of color, many of whom she didn't know personally. And this would inspire her to say things like, "Gee, you remind me a lot of me." And then she would turn to my then Visualize collaborator, Claudia Rodriguez, and say, "But I looked like you." We became close a few years later after we first met. Our relationship sealed after I played young Córdova in a short play that Big Papa wrote based on excerpts from when we were outlaws. That was so much fun because I got to say stuff from the book like, "Non-monogamy was hell in coupledom, even for butches like me who are naturally suited to the practice." Say stuff like that with a straight face. The short play Big Papa wrote would become the cornerstone of her Los Angeles book party, and my portrayal of a brash and blustering journalist and free-loving seducer was received so well that lesbians who came of age politically with Big Papa sometimes still call me Young Córdova. The experience pleased Big Papa so much, and the love and affection that grew between us was so palpable that, like a lover chasing another, she declared to me that she would be my father and I her son. I was the luckiest young brown butch in all of Los Angeles, for I've always admired the major role Big Papa played as organizer and commentator. She, the heart of the collective that organized the West Coast Lesbian Feminist Conference, the first ever convergence of its kind in 1973. Even then, in that political and cultural milieu, being a butch lesbian was suspect. Over the years, we talked about how much she suffered keeping that major part of her identity at bay for the comfort of other lesbian kin and comrades who held those misgivings about butch being a patriarchal construct. I learned so much from her the way that a child is supposed to from a parent that loves him or her very much. The way intergenerational butches love and value one another, because we know that we live in the specter of annihilation every day. And that's one thing I will always take and wrap myself in whenever I lose sight of collective goals and dreams. That Big Papa was up against the structural oppression that in her young lifetime was supposed to be set in stone. But never did she let that noise stop her from doing what was just, what was right. Jeanne was generous in her paternal butch love and counsel. She gave me the courage to grow up and trust myself, to always hold myself with poise and panache. She also gave me, along with so many other lesbian and queer children, the gift of her words. Words that describe a hard-won life. May we continue to find joy and wisdom in the bohemian heart that beats to a butch rhythm in the outlaw language Jeanne Córdova crafted over the last few decades, such as this piece, her opening from butches, lies, and feminism, from persistent desire, the femme butch reader. Someday they'll come for the butches. Who will speak for us? Passion keeps me alive. When I cease to live audaciously, that day I'll die. Being a butch has been the most troublesome and most delicious experience of my life. Being a butch, like being a woman, a lesbian, having a soul, is not something I can dismiss. I believe butches are born, not made. Since this is my birthright, I choose to glory in it. When I comb my hair back and strut out my front door, butch is my hallelujah. Querido butches and Jeanne Córdova.
Thank you, Raquel. Your portrayal and your relationship made Jeanne really happy. And now, in a bit of a change of pace, we're going to hear from two other members of Jeanne's family of choice, and like Raquel, also members of the Lesbian Writing Collective that has met for years around the Coral Allen dining room table. Judith Bransford and Heidi Becher will read from Jeanne's remarkable letter to her community about living and dying, and they each have a few of their own books to share.
They all. No, they all.
I'll begin with some personal remarks that are very brief. I admired Jeanne for her proactivist leadership and for her writing. And I think it must be said, it must not be forgotten. In the very earliest days, her political vision was fiercely inclusive of trans women. What I want to simply say now is that Jeanne was an amazing friend. She knew how to share politically, philosophically, deeply, intimately. And for her, this was so much about what it was all about. More than anything, I'm grateful to her for the transformative power of her friendship.
This letter is meant as a notification and thank you to the thousands of members of the national lesbian community whose activism, lives, and loves have touched my own. especially those dykes who have become family and siblings of choice over the last 40 years. Yes, the rumors are true. I have metastasized to brain cancer. I am dying from it in my cerebellum.
Many of us have gotten cancer and died. I write publicly to the women who have defined my life because I want to share this last journey, as I have shared so much of my activist life with you. You gave me a life's cause. It is wonderful to have had a life's cause. Freedom and dignity for lesbians. I believe that's what lesbian feminism is really about, sharing. We built a movement by telling each other our lives and thoughts about the world it should be. We cut against the grain and we thought almost everything, just enough got undone for our daughters to reinvent themselves. Death should be a part of life, not hidden, not a secret, something we never said out loud.
Being an organizer and journalist in the lesbian, gay, feminist, and women of color communities and loving it has been the focal point of my life. It has been a wild, joyous ride. I feel more than adequately thanked by the many awards I have received from all the queer communities and through all the descriptions and quotes in history books that have documented my role as an organizer, publisher, speaker, and author. Thanks to all of you who have given me a place in our history.
From the age of 18 to 21, I painfully looked everywhere for Lesbian Nation. On October 3rd, 1970, the day I celebrated my political birthday, I found her, and it articulated me. That's when my life's work became clear. Shortly thereafter, I became a core organizer for 2 national lesbian conferences and created the Lesbian Tide News magazine, a national paper of record, as the historians say, for the lesbian feminist generation. And on and went for multiple decades of marches and later online organizing, this time intersectionally, to include all of me and my Latina identity.
Somewhere in the middle of that, I invented the Gay and Lesbian Community Yellow Pages, a first for our by then national tribe. This Los Angeles 400-page guide helped us still have hidden people to connect with businesses and professionals that spoke to us within our own identities. This directory and lucky timing and lifelong real estate also enabled me to fulfill an early personal vow to give back half of my estate to our movement. I believe it is so critical to our transforming movements to leave our estates to our LGBTQ charities.
I have read the obituaries and Lesbian Connection these last years as they chronicle the passage of my second wave generation. The one message that rings out clearly is that so many in these pages are activists who articulated social justice in their local or regional spaces. Many dykes making change. So many of your loved ones have gone through death rituals in these last years. It makes me feel like one of the gang. Again. I want to say thank you to all of you who have loved another woman-identified woman, who have loved me or have loved Lesbian Nation. Lesbians do have a special love for one another. I have felt it many times when women are with each other. I am happy and content to have participated in it for most of my very full and happy life. Lest you be too sad, know that I have this kind of love, not only with my family of choice, but with a straight arrow spouse with whom I have journeyed these last 26 years.
I was very pleased to be able to end this, well, exactly end it with Jeanne's words. While I have journeyed with Jeanne for only 6 years or so, one thing I have learned, and heard it over and over again, Jeanne was very seductive. She was seductive in many ways. I know this because she seduced me. She seduced me into writing, conversation, and activism that challenged me and led me to my better self, my best self. This is a gift she has given many of us. For that and much more, I have loved Jeanne and bid her farewell.
initiative. And thank you to everyone who has spoken or sung. A few more thank yous. I want to thank the fabulous Team Jeanne that created this celebration. I can attest that they are a truly tremendous bunch of can-do women and a couple of can-do guys. Special thanks to the always amazing Jeanette Bronson. In addition to the beautiful song that she shared with us, she's an event producer, stage manager, wrangler of helpful lesbians, and periodic midnight therapist. And the most special recognition to our sister of choice, whose determined, loving hand shaped and guided this entire production. Thank you, Lynn Allen. So, again, I want to thank you all for joining in this celebration, and we're going to adjourn momentarily to the reception in the lobby. But first, naturally, there's a couple of instructions. In the lobby, there's a guest book, and I want to invite you and urge you to please sign it, and if you're so moved, to share a memory or a wish or thought of what Jeanne has meant to you. And also, there's a video booth, so again, please do take a moment, share some reflections and some thoughts about Jeanne. These both are going to become part of the collection at the Lum Archives. As you can see in the program book, in keeping with among Jeanne's commitments, those of you who are inspired to make a contribution in Jeanne's honor, there are donation options. Please have a look. If you'd like additional information, there's information, of course, naturally outside on the literature table in the lobby. Jeanne set an example for all of us, so please, give it a thought. And think also about this. As we savor all that we've experienced together this afternoon, Jeanne's closing upon being honored with the Melissa Etheridge Award at the Dyke March here in LA. She said this: "You too can start a movement, or a wing of a movement. Come up with a creative idea, something that grips people, and start something. And tonight's creative idea is going to be marching down the boulevard." So she said, "March with me." So to close out our celebration and put a spring and a little swagger in our step is her good friend and kindred spirit in dapper style and irresistible charm. Frank has described herself as the all-American Jewish lesbian folk singer. Adam Locke, writing for The Advocate, captured some of the humor and subversive power of that presentation, saying, "Her unnerving androgyny, expressed with easy confidence, and her fervent opinions, couched in sly laconic wit, make her a fascinating performer." So true. And she's also gifted in visual arts, whose work has been compared by the New York Times reviewer to that of Andy Warhol. So we fill our hearts with humor, love of life, and love of fabulous Jewish lesbian sensibility. Here's Frank.
Oh, I'm such a lucky duck. A lucky duck. Because when I was 17, I went to the magazine stand across from Cantor's, and I found a copy of The Lesbian Tie. And on the back of The Lesbian Tie, there was an ad for a lesbian feminist drop-in rap group at the Women's Center on Hill Street. And I lied to my mom and I said I was going to the library. And I rode my bicycle to that Women's Center. And I found my people. And that's where I met Jeanne Córdova. At the Women's Center on Hill Street, holding court over the Lesbian Tie. I'm forever grateful. She was such a shining butch in my life. She loved this song because she loved to swagger. She held her head up high, always. So Jeanne, we're gonna swagger with you today and forevermore. Every young man who can pass from every lipstick lazy lass, from every drag queen's high heel stagger, to every bold dagger swagger, come on, do the whole dagger, bold dagger swagger, do the whole dagger, bold dagger swagger, do the whole dagger swagger, girl. This is a true story. I was charmed, small, a darling, greedy, and profane. A femininity and all out. I'm not trying to be a man. I'm just a being who I am. And that's the very, very, very butch. A lesbian and do the whole dagger, but that's the swagger. Do the whole dagger, but that's the swagger. Do the whole dagger, swagger, yeah. Where the buttons in the house? Swagger! And the Butch Boys in concert. The Butches all got out of their seats. And they proudly swaggered down the aisles. And up onto the stage. Down the other side of the stage. I see no more fitting place. With Jeanne smiling down on us, let's see you. What's your swagger? Let's bring up the lights. Let's get some swagger and come on, do the whole dagger. Both dagger, dagger, come on, do the whole dagger. Both dagger, dagger, do the whole dagger, swagger, yeah. If you want it, if you ain't with it, if you feel like swaggering, please. Join me in the swagger. Come on down the aisle, up the stairs, across the stairs. The swagger is flying on in the whole dagger. Do the whole swagger, whole dagger, swagger. Do the whole dagger, swagger, yeah. Come on. I wish the ladies knew my majesty. Why was everybody staring at me? A little girl, a lady cat, wrong on my lap, I got a heart attack. She's hiding in a little dagger, oh, that's the dagger. Do the whole dagger, oh, that's the dagger. Do the whole dagger, oh, that's the
Waggerer. Just Waggerer. Can't do it without you. Wagger it on. Wagger it. Saw Elena. Wagger it. Woo! Wagger it. Wagger it.